Hey everybody, welcome back to the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. My name is Eric Herlock, and oh boy do we have a show for you today. So longtime listeners of the show know that here in Pennsylvania we've got two guys by the name of Steve Groff in the hemp space. And every once in a while I like to interview them both just to see what's happening in the world of Steve Groff. So we're going to hear from Dr. Steve Groff from Groff North America, who you remember from the HempTrain story that we covered a couple of years ago. He's taken a really interesting pivot into the world of federally legal cannabis. We'll explain what that means in a bit. We're also going to talk to Lancaster County farmer Steve Groff about what's happening down at his farm in Lancaster County, Cedar Meadow.Farm. We'll hear about his CBD brand, and we're going to talk about some regenerative farming ideas and, what is that barrier that keeps some farmers from really getting into soil health practices. So all that and more on this double Steve Groff episode. But wait, that's not all. So earlier this week, we had some breaking news here in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania State Senator Judy Schwank, who has been instrumental in moving hemp legislation forward here in the state, she announced this week that she is putting forth a bill that will hopefully make hemp a legal ingredient for livestock feed. You know, we've been covering that issue now for a while, and I don't know, does she listen to the podcast? I think she might, because she understands how important this issue is. So we're going to hear from Senator Schwank first, and then we'll hear from the Steve Groffs. We'll take a quick sponsor break and then come back with a few nuggets of hemp news and then get into our interviews with Senator Schwank, Steve Groff, and Steve Groff. This episode is brought to you in part by King's Agri-Seeds. King's Agri-Seeds knows that farming is local, and they've been screening products for local adaptation since 1993. Using their research farm in Christiana, Pennsylvania, King's is working to ensure seed varieties are fit for the East. Hemp is no different. Whether you are growing for grain, fiber, or CBD, King's Agri-Seeds has you covered. Give King's a call at 717-687-6224 or visit kingsagriseeds.com. This episode is brought to you in part by IND Hemp in Fort Benton, Montana, where their mission is to provide innovative agricultural products and services to connect American farmers with the pioneers and businesses that see hemp as a way to bring real and lasting change to our communities and planet. IND Hemp. This episode is brought to you in part by iHemp Michigan. Join us at the 2022 Midwest iHemp Expo as we talk about the power of hemp. On May 20th and 21st, iHemp Michigan is host to the Midwest's largest cannabis trade show. With over 30 breakout education sessions, both business-to-business and consumer-focused education, the show will be packed with opportunities to network and learn. Visit ihempmichigan.com to learn more. All right, and speaking of the iHemp Michigan Midwest Hemp Expo, they do have early bird pricing happening right now. So if you're thinking about going to the Midwest Hemp Expo at the end of May, you should get your tickets now because it's a lot cheaper with the early bird pricing. And I am actually going to be there. I'm going to Michigan at the end of May. So if you're going, I look forward to seeing you there. Okay, if you're going to NOCO next week, have fun. Unfortunately, I won't be there with you, but please, if you see anything interesting, send it my way. All right, a few nuggets of hemp news for this week of March 17th. This first one is about Replant Hemp, and we've heard about Replant Hemp before. Last time we talked to Jeff Whaling from the National Hemp Association. This is his latest venture Jeff Whaling, chair of the National Hemp Association, and Michael Woods, CEO, COO of Black Buffalo 3D Corporation, officially launched their first-to-market hemp impact fund focused on bio-based innovation and decarbonizing the global economy. So it says that Replant Hemp Advisors, LLC, officially opened the Replant Hemp Impact Fund. As the world transitions from a fossil-based economy, the fund is focusing on bio-based innovation, a carbon-negative domestic supply chain, good green jobs, sustainable consumer products, and the verifiable sequestration of carbon dioxide. Industrial hemp is a growth industry set to add almost $10 billion to its current $5 billion global market size in the next 5 years. Replant Hemp Advisors LLC aims to place $500 million in the space by 2030, with the fund's first close set at $75 million. All right, this story comes from Oregon. It's on hemptoday.net. The headline reads, Oregon counties declare state of emergency and halt hemp licensing. I think we reported on this a few weeks ago, but this is a further development of the story. A marijuana state of emergency declared last week means no hemp licenses will be granted in 2 southern Oregon counties this year, as the state attempts to crack down on illegal pot plantations in the area. State lawmakers last month passed a law that requires a stoppage in licensing if a county has declared a state of emergency over illegal marijuana production. Officials said the law intends to address pirate marijuana growing operations they say have been masquerading as licensed hemp operators. According to the story, Jackson County was already under a state of emergency declared in October 21, and Josephine County commissioners declared one just last week. Officials in the 2 counties have said the illicit operations, often financed by foreign criminal gangs and drug cartels, have overwhelmed police and regulatory agencies. State inspectors found that 53% of licensed hemp growers tested last year in Jackson and Josephine counties, located in the extreme southwest corner of the state, were determined to be growing marijuana under the guise of hemp. This next story is from thedailyreporter.com. This is coming out of Michigan. The headline reads, Hemp farmers soon regulated along with recreational marijuana grower. Farmers in southwest Michigan who grew hemp over the last 3 years now must obtain licenses from the same agency that issues them for recreational cannabis. The Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development currently regulates hemp. In February, Governor Gretchen Whitmer issued an emergency order effective April 13th to turn hemp regulation over to the Marijuana Regulatory Agency, which becomes the Cannabis Regulatory Agency. Authority over hemp processors and handlers under the Industrial Hemp Research and Development Act will shift to the new Cannabis Regulatory Agency. And the Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development will continue to oversee hemp cultivation. This next story comes out of New York State. It says that Governor Kathy Hochul announced the opening of the web-based application portal for hemp farmers seeking to obtain a conditional license to grow adult-use cannabis in the 2022 growing season. The license was made possible by a law the governor signed last month. New York is moving full speed ahead to create the most inclusive adult-use cannabis industry in the nation through our Seeding Opportunity Initiative, the New York governor said. This initiative will create meaningful opportunities for economic empowerment for New York farmers and impacted communities. Now that our application portal is open, I encourage every eligible New York farmer to participate in the farm-to-sale pipeline that will create jobs and opportunity throughout the Empire State. I'll put a link to that application portal on the show page for this episode at lancasterfarming.com. But if you, dear listener, are a hemp grower in New York State and you're thinking about getting into the adult use, let me know. I would love to hear, what's going on with that. All right, and finally, one more story. This is on hempindustrydaily.com. The headline says, New Hemp Research Consortium attracts funding from tech and ag giants. The story says that instrumentation powerhouse Agilent Technologies is joining forces with one of the most prominent companies in agriculture to bankroll a public-private hemp research effort aimed at increasing hemp profitability. Members of the New Hemp Research Consortium will donate $5 million for economic hemp research at Cornell University, North Carolina State University, and the University of Kentucky. Another consortium contributor is U.S. Sugar, commonly called Big Sugar, a Florida-based company that is the nation's largest producer of sugarcane by volume. Half the money, $2.5 million, is coming from the Federal Foundation for Food and Agricultural Research, a research arm of the USDA. Other members include Scott's Miracle-Gro, IND Hemp, Oregon CBD, and International Hemp. All right, so that does it for the hemp news nuggets this week. I'll put links to all of these things on the show page for the episode at lancasterfarming.com. Senator Judy Schwank, welcome back to the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. How are you doing this morning?
I am great, Eric. Thanks for inviting me to be on.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, I saw the news just yesterday that you've introduced a bill concerning hemp grain in Pennsylvania as a livestock feed. So I wonder if you could first just explain what that bill is all about.
Yes, so we issued a co-sponsorship memo, I should say, and it would allow hemp to be grown and fed as commercial feed to horses, pets, and specialty pets and livestock.
Okay. And currently, right now, hemp grain has a generally regarded as safe status from the FDA, but it's currently illegal to feed to animals.
That's correct.
I don't really understand that logic, but tell me about, why you thought this was the time to do it and why this is important and how this will affect Pennsylvanians.
Well, let me go back a bit.
Sure.
I was the prime sponsor of the bill that reintroduced hemp to Pennsylvania agriculture back in 2015 and was there at the bill signing in the governor's office when we were finally, put in place a program to produce hemp in the Commonwealth, and have worked with the Department of Agriculture on the licensing requirements over the years, helping to amend it and to, make sure that there's as much opportunity for Pennsylvania farmers as possible. Mm-hmm. So, certainly I've been watching as things have happened, have introduced some other bills relative to hemp use. But, watching, how a lot of people started to grow it, but most of the market was concentrated on the flower portion of the hemp plant, primarily for CBD production, right?
Yep.
Now you are also starting to hear about hemp, the actual plant itself, being used as a material to be put into building products such as concrete or insulation, things of that nature. And so there's the industry is building towards that. The CBD portion of this seems to have been, kind of shot up there, but then I think a lot of farmers experienced a real downturn in terms of the market for this. So knowing, one, that, there's so many uses for hemp, but primarily looking at the grain that is produced, the seed actually, and knowing that this has been used in birdseed. I just had hemp hearts in my yogurt this morning. The germ of the seed is removed, the hull is removed. It cannot be germinated as a seed, and I can't grow it as a plant. But the nutritional value of the hemp is still there.
Yeah, it's a superfood.
It's a superfood. It really is. That's why I consume it myself. But I know that it could be a real benefit to livestock as well. Could be another alternative for a feedstock for certainly starting with pets. It already is in birdseed. Right. There's no doubt about that. But it could be expanded, and other states are looking at this. For example, Montana has passed legislation that would allow hemp to be fed, hemp seed to be fed to livestock. Mm-hmm. So that's the impetus behind this.
Okay. Now, I guess last month there was a letter issued by the Association of American Feed Control Officials, the AAFCO, sort of putting out a sharing their concern to policymakers and ag leaders about maybe not rushing into using hemp as a feed. But the way I read that letter is they sort of conflate, hemp flower with hemp grain, and they lump it all together. But your proposed bill is different, that it's just looking at the grain.
It's just looking at the grain, right? And again, we're fighting that misinformation that we battled against when we first legalize the production of hemp in Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
Just this misunderstanding that this was, going to have some sort of psychoactive impacts either on humans and in this case on livestock.
Right.
Research is being done in other states regarding the use of hemp as livestock feed. If I can eat it, and humans can consume it, and lots of people do, I don't see that is going to be an issue.
Sure. And there's some evidence that humans and livestock have been eating hemp seed for hundreds, if not thousands, if not tens of thousands of years.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
And one thing I do understand, of course, is that, we have to follow federal guidelines. So what this bill really does is position Pennsylvania to be ready when we get the go-ahead to be able to use hemp as a livestock feed. And I think it will also, allow it to be a food additive as well, CBD, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think that at some point the Federal Drug Administration is going to move on some of these issues. And Pennsylvania is, we're primed in terms of our climate, the interest of farmers in growing this, our soils. We are certainly have and could produce great hemp crops. And it might be easier in terms of the infrastructure to harvest this grain than it has been for CBD or even for the, using the stalks of hemp.
The fiber, sure.
The fiber. So there may be an easier transition for that. This may be one of the biggest benefits of growing hemp in Pennsylvania.
Right.
But we've got to be able to do it first.
Yeah. Because our Pennsylvania farmers grow great grains already.
Exactly.
So this would just be one more crop to throw in the rotation.
Exactly.
And you mentioned about the fiber, like we don't have a lot of processing here in the state for the fiber of the plant. And as you mentioned, the CBD, there's a lot of, that the whole market is kind of screwy.
Right.
So yeah. Is there anything that our listeners or your constituents can do to, help convince other members of the Pennsylvania legislature that this should go through?
Absolutely. And I would particularly like our farmers and those that are interested in growing hemp as a crop to reach out to their legislators, particularly members of the Senate. I don't know that a House bill has been introduced, a companion bill to this, but already we just released it yesterday and we've got co-sponsors from the Senate, bipartisan, by the way. So I do think that there's going to be, interest in this.
Okay. Can I ask who those co-sponsors are?
Yes. One is Senator David Argel, as well as Senator John Kane from Delaware County.
Okay, great. This bill, I think, would position Pennsylvania as one of the leaders in the hemp grain space. Do you agree?
Well, I think that's a natural fit for us. In terms of, we talked about before, all the aspects of Pennsylvania agriculture. We really could fill the need for this almost immediately. It just has to be legal to be able to do that. And we certainly will have to work with the Department of Agriculture. That obviously they have concerns and will want to discuss some of these issues. Okay. But I think overall, I have seen the philosophy from PDA to be, they want to see hemp grown in the Commonwealth, and they want to be, ensure that farmers can profit from it.
Yeah. Have you been working with PDA on developing this proposed legislation?
We've been talking with them about many aspects of hemp production. I will have conversations with the secretary and deputy secretaries. In fact, I'm seeing Secretary Redding today, so I will bring this up to him for sure.
Okay, great.
And I think they know about it.
Yeah, I bet they do. How about working with the folks in Montana? Have you been in touch with some of those lawmakers?
Not yet, but we certainly will be. We have patterned other legislation after what they've done in other states. I am very active in working with other senators who represent agriculture or serve on agriculture committees throughout the country. That's where I got the original idea about the hemp. We patterned that legislation, at least the one that I introduced, after what we had seen in Kentucky and some other states.
Okay.
Ultimately, the House bill passed, but it was the exact same language as the Senate bill.
Okay.
So yes, I'm in contact with them and will continue to be. If we can avoid some pitfalls, I think that would be a good thing for Pennsylvania.
Yeah, right. What are some of those potential pitfalls?
Well, I think there will be some concerns from dealers, for example. We'll have to convince likely some, some of the commercial marketers of animal feed to try this product or to consider using it. But again, I'll mention it's already been in birdseed for a long, long time. So particularly in the specialty pet industry,
Mm-hmm.
I think there will be, be a natural transition there.
Okay. Do you expect any pushback, or do you think like everyone sees this as a win-win?
I think there will be pushback, certainly one because of the FDA position and also that concern regarding the possible side effects of using a product that is the same plant as the marijuana plant. It's same species, it's just without the THC in it. I would assume those are the varieties, the cultivars that would be grown.
Right. Yeah. The seed, from what I understand, doesn't contain any cannabinoidal
No.
Stuff. So there's
Not
no
even
THC,
in the actual
CBD.
plants, the cultivars that are
Right.
grown for their, psychoactive effect. Yeah, you're right. It's
Yeah.
not.
So good. Well, I applaud your efforts here. I think this is going to be great for farmers in Pennsylvania and for the hemp industry in Pennsylvania and for Pennsylvanians in general. So thank you, Senator Schwenk.
Thank you. We have to get started somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And I don't want the momentum on hemp, to be lost. And I still want to be able to encourage farmers to keep, growing this plant.
Yeah, yeah. Is there anything else you would like to share with our listeners about the work you're doing or hemp in general?
Well, stay tuned. Let me know, what your thoughts are. I know some people will be looking at how do they start experimenting with this. I'd suggest you, go online, look at the research that they're doing in other states. I'm not condoning anybody to try growing it and start it. That's not what I mean. But, do your research.
Sure.
And hopefully we'll be able to move this through.
Pennsylvania Senator Judy Schwenk, thank you so much for your time today. It's always great to talk to you.
Thank you, Eric.
Dr. Steve Groff from Groff North America, welcome back to our podcast. How have you been?
Oh, great. Great to be with you again, Eric.
Yeah, so I have to say that you have had one of the most interesting trajectories in the hemp space here in Pennsylvania. So a few years ago, you contracted with farmers to grow, a couple of thousand acres of fiber hemp. You were in the process of setting up a processing center in York County, Pennsylvania with the HempTrain. But lately, you've gone in a very different direction. Can you tell our listeners what you're up to now and sort of what went into your decision-making process?
Glad to. I would say this is still related, although certainly a different aspect of cannabis. Throughout the process, we began to look at decortication and initially CBD production. And as we all know, the markets have taken some serious changes, and particularly in CBD. We had a great interest in hemp fiber and some of its utilities in construction materials, textiles, et cetera. And we still have that interest, and we purchased one of the first decorticating machines here in the country called a HempTrain, and had some initial success with that. And also then I was presented with the opportunity to really use my medical credentials and work with the federal government in developing a cannabis research center. I've been a physician for 30 years here in Pennsylvania, and I became interested in working with the FDA and the DEA. And it took nearly 2 years, but I was fortunate to be one of 4 new cultivators of research marijuana. And those licenses were granted to us in May of last year. And we've worked really hard to build out a facility to allow that for indoor cultivation of high THC cannabis for research and other manufacturing. So it's been an incredible journey. We're very blessed to be in the position we're in, but it's taken a lot of hard work and persistence for sure.
Yeah. So before the DEA granted these licenses, what was sort of the landscape of like federally legal cannabis in the U.S.?
Yeah, so for 50 years or more, the University of Mississippi has been the only source of federally legal research marijuana. And there's been a lot of issues with that over the last 2 or 3 decades, and folks have tried to get licenses to grow. And then finally, 5 years ago, the government decided that they were going to really end that monopoly. And it took 5 years to name 4 new growers. And we were one of the 4 in America that were named. And we really presented a comprehensive plan to the FDA and the DEA to be a national cannabis research center. And so we were granted an unprecedented suite of licenses from the DEA to manufacture, grow flower, extract it, and create patient dose forms for research. And so these have never existed in one private company before. So we're incredibly fortunate.
Wow. Yeah. So you said there was a few new licenses granted. Like what all went into that application process? Like what did you have to submit?
Nearly 2 years of background checks, documentation, preparing our facility with high-level security, developing a research project and protocol that were approved by the FDA. As I mentioned, I've been a physician, still am a licensed physician, really focusing on cannabinoid healthcare. Mm-hmm. And I submitted a project to the FDA to look at the antimicrobial aspects of cannabinoids. And this was a Schedule I research project, including THC. And I was granted that project. It was approved by DEA and FDA. And I knew when I received that I was likely to be named one of the growers once they got around to it. And it took nearly 18 more months. Again, a real long slog, but well worth it now. And we're very fortunate to be in a position where.
Yeah. So tell me, what's the difference between federally legal cannabis and, just regular cannabis?
So as we know, cannabis with THC of less than 0.3 is now defined as hemp. And
sure.
So even marijuana, once it's diluted to 0.3, would be considered hemp, and then vice versa. We know at the federal level, marijuana is still Schedule I. It shouldn't be there, but it is. And so every state marijuana program that exists, and there are now 38 of them, and 16 or 17 of those states even have recreational, they're all violating federal law. And therefore, none of those facilities can deduct their business expenses. They can't participate in interstate commerce. As a federally legal cannabis grower, we can sell to other researchers. We can sell to other countries. In fact, we're the only people in America that can export cannabis from America. The wow. 5 of us have these licenses. So, and we can operate as a normal business. We're bankable. We're legal from a federal standpoint.
Wow.
Every other high THC cannabis operation in America is violating federal law. Again, don't shoot the messenger, just how it's set up.
Sure.
So we went after this specific path because we felt it was unique and certainly played to my strengths as a physician.
Yeah. Were there costs involved? Did you have to pay fees for this, or how did that work?
That's a great question. So anyone can apply to be a controlled substance manufacturer. Any person at all can apply. There's a modest fee of $3,800. However, it's extremely difficult. And I spent a significant amount of investment capital in building out a Schedule I security system. So I went ahead, I needed to do this, invest ahead of time, and put in high-level security that's consistent with what the DEA would require for a controlled substance manufacturing facility, like any pharmaceutical facility, including narcotics and otherwise. So we invested and put that infrastructure in place, and that was impressive to the DEA. They showed we were serious. Obviously, then once I received the research protocol approval, that was another huge step in the right direction.
Okay. So can you describe the facilities now? You have a growing operation there, and you have a testing, a lab, or what does it look like?
Yeah, so we operate out of a facility here in York, Pennsylvania. We have highly controlled grow facilities now in place. We literally harvested our first harvest at the end of December from a single grow room, nearly 60 pounds of product of high THC flower. We hit THC levels that we were very, very excited about. And then interestingly, that transaction took place. We harvested that flower, and by law, we had to sell it to the DEA on essentially a virtual basis and then buy it back. And so the United States is a participant in the single convention with 185 countries around the world. And so when cocoa leaves, opium poppies, or marijuana flower are grown by any grower anywhere in the world, they have to sell that to a government entity and then buy it back. And therefore, that government entity is in control of it. Well, we completed this historic transaction with the DA a few weeks ago, bought it right back. It went beautifully. It was the first time in history that this transaction took place. And so we're off and running. We also have a DEA Schedule 1 analytical lab with full HPLC and GC mass spec for in-house testing. So we obviously take testing very serious in our product. And we have CO2 extraction and a full suite of distillation and further refining equipment.
Okay. Earlier you mentioned that they give you sort of a suite of licenses. Can you sort of give me the high level look at what those different licenses are and what they do?
Sure. We have 7 of them. Number 1 is my medical license as a doctor. Number 2 is a Schedule 1 researcher with the FDA approved project I described, looking at the antimicrobial aspects of cannabinoids. The major 2 are the bulk manufacturing license for marijuana flower, which allows us to grow, cultivate, and harvest marijuana flower. The second most important one is what's called a dosage form, where we can then take that marijuana flower and turn it into a pre-roll, into a vape, a tablet, a gummy for research. And we're the only private company that has that license particularly. So we also have import and export licenses, which are very important. We're one of 5 companies in America that can export cannabis around the world to other legal operations. And so that is the suite.
Okay. So obviously you're not just selling it to the government and buying it back. You're selling it out to what, research universities, or who are your customers at this point now?
Great question. Once we buy it back and modify the flower, it becomes our possession, and then it's known as a cannabis preparation. It's no longer marijuana flower. So any mechanical or chemical modification, including extraction, turns it into a product that we keep in our stock and we sell. And so we have a range of customers. I'm very excited about some major universities that we're now working with. We're providing cannabis material for very important research with some of the top universities in America. Some of the other examples of commercial opportunities include some of the large life science companies that do testing standards. We know testing of hemp and cannabis is very important and needs to improve. And so some of the biggest companies in the world in this space have decided they want to become experts in cannabis. And so this is an example of a commercialization where a publicly traded company can now work with a company like us with federally legal marijuana to develop better quality testing standards, matrix specific reference standards, some very unique things. And so we have some large life science companies as customers as well.
Okay. What are some of the THC levels that you're able to achieve?
They're quite high. I'd rather just keep that proprietary, but we're extremely satisfied with the first crop. Very satisfied, and work on even maximizing some of those genetic qualities as well as we go forward.
Speaking of genetics, like where are you getting your genetics from?
So we have 3 varietals or strains that we've started with in our first cultivation. The unique thing about our business is that we can bring in genetics from anywhere in the world at any time. This is different from many of the state programs where we're able to bring these products in for a specific customer or our own research from really anywhere in the world. So we started with 3, but we have the opportunity to really explore the galaxy, if you will, of genetics and future genetics. Okay.
So obviously cannabis has a lot of potential, on the medical side. What are some of the less obvious, but most promising, potentials of cannabis from your perspective?
From a medical standpoint, I think treatment of sleep disorders, chronic insomnia, anxiety, PTSD, opioid addiction, other mental health concerns, GI issues like irritable bowel, Crohn's, and ulcerative colitis. I could go on and on.
Yeah, go for it.
Like I said, I've been a physician for 30 years. I would not have been a believer advocate a few years ago. I'm now fully supportive of deep exploration in all these different ailments and how cannabinoid therapy, both low and high THC, can help these and other human afflictions. Over the last 3 years, I've also practiced as a physician in Pennsylvania, certifying people for the Pennsylvania Cannabis Program. Mm-hmm. While not prescribing it, I certified them for their condition. Those 3,500 people have been an incredible database for research and my own interface. And I've been just thrilled with the improvement in these people's lives. And so I've decided to make this my life's work, and very excited about it.
Well, that's great. With cannabinoid therapy, is that like, I'm not sure how to ask this, but it's like, would you just take it once, or would it be an ongoing sort of treatment, or, how does that work in a lot of cases?
Well, it certainly varied, but I would say the easiest way to describe it would be a modest dose on a daily basis, and whether that's once a day or more. But I'm a big believer that THC can be very powerful, but it does not have to be at the 60, 70, 90% range that's offered so commonly in America's medical cannabis programs. And so you can be healthy and not high. And I'm not here judging, the recreational use of THC, but what we call low THC medical cannabis, i.e. hemp formulations, can be incredibly beneficial pharmaceutically without anyone being stoned or high. But they get the benefit of some THC and some other cannabinoids as well.
Like less is more.
Yeah. Yes, particularly for seniors. We think the senior population, the end of life folks, unfortunately, we all face that at some point, but we think there's tremendous utility in the senior population and some of the nursing home populations with this low THC cannabinoid formulation concept.
Mm-hmm. I know there's many different ways to ingest cannabis, but I think sort of the traditional method is smoking it. What are your thoughts, like, from your position as a doctor on inhaling smoke? Like, is that, I mean, I know I grew up, in the 80s, and, cigarette smoking was, obviously it's terrible, but does smoking marijuana have that same kind of like carcinogen effect in the lungs?
That's an incredible question. And my understanding and my theory at this point is there's no significant evidence that someone who would smoke combustible cannabis their whole life has a higher risk of cancer. Now, that's a population rarely studied, but anecdotally, I would say that's been thrown out there. And we know that combusting cigarettes can lead to cancer. I'm not here to recommend combustion of nicotine cigarettes nor marijuana cigarettes. Mm-hmm. Clearly, that's the most inexpensive and historically common way to use it. We are exploring a number of other routes of administration for both inhalation, sublingual, oral, and topical. And we think inhalation of cannabinoids can be developed and used safely, but we need FDA-approved metered devices and far more accurate dosing. And that's something we're working on with some of the universities and other private partners.
Okay. So whatever happened to those bales of hemp? I saw them out there in the facility in Red Lion. Did they get turned into anything, or what's going on with the fiber?
A great question. We grew in a phenomenal crop of high quality hemp fiber. We had some initial challenges with the HempTrain processing it. I am still very bullish on hemp long term for shelter, for clothing, for food, medicine. But we decided to focus our efforts really on this exciting new opportunity. Mm-hmm. The HempTrain is still in our possession as most of that hemp fiber. We're actually in talks with a number of strategic partners about that right now.
Okay.
So me personally, I'm still very bullish on hemp fiber and want to see it brought to its exciting possibilities. It's going to take a lot of infrastructure and time and capital.
For sure. Yeah.
But it's a great thing, and we look forward to supporting that part of the industry any way we can.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I feel like that HempTrain could still play a pivotal role here in processing in Pennsylvania, right?
I do too, and in fact, we're in, like I said, interesting strategic discussions right now about that. So,
okay.
The hemp fiber thing is phenomenal. It has challenges. We faced a bunch of them, but we also are well aware of some of the opportunities in concrete reinforcement, not just hempcrete blocks, but actually concrete reinforcement for shotcrete and other things. The evidence is clearly there, but the infrastructure and supply chain need to be built out.
So what else should listeners know about the work you're doing now, or the work you're moving towards in the future?
Stay tuned for some really exciting public announcements coming out of our operation. We've been working hard. Obviously, we just got these licenses last May, but we've made some incredible strides thus far. As I said, we had the first legal transaction with the DEA. We have some exciting news that we'll be sharing with the public over the next couple of weeks and months. But we're working hard to improve the science and data around cannabis and cannabinoid therapy, both from hemp or marijuana, if you will. I think the plan is amazing, and thankful to have made it my life's work at this point.
All right, Dr. Steve Groff from Groff North America. Thank you so much for your time today.
No problem. Always a pleasure, Eric.
Steve Groff, welcome back to our podcast. How are you doing?
Oh, Eric, I'm doing great. I was just thinking today that I think it was about 3 years ago that we had our first interview. So I was kind of reflecting on that, and I thought, I could say that almost everything I knew at that point has turned out to be different. I'll say in the last 3 years, man, have we learned a lot in this hemp space. But wow, is there still a lot to figure out?
Yeah,
and I'm committed. I'm here for the long term. So here we are 3 years later, still trying to figure things out.
Yeah, I remember that. We met at a greenhouse down in Lancaster County, and we had sort of a roundtable discussion with a few of your business partners at the time. So it's been quite a journey we've been on together here.
Yep.
So yesterday you were a speaker at the Pennsylvania No-Till Alliance Soil Health Meeting, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So can you tell me, what's the biggest barrier that keeps farmers from implementing soil health practices?
Well, as I mentioned, I feel the biggest barrier right now is some of the existing models that are out there. We have, I guess you'd say we as farmers have over, the decades have kind of honed in on in a big sense, a way to farm. And if you really start to analyze now with this regenerative agriculture movement that I'm, involved with, we have to rethink everything. And what's really interesting is a lot of the things that I and my farmer friends in the regen ag movement have been talking about for years, all of a sudden we're getting more attention now, because one of the pillars, principles in regenerative agriculture is reducing the need for inputs. And now that the inputs are double to triple in price, it's like, oh, now all of a sudden these regenerative practices might make sense. And I mean economic sense.
Yeah.
Whereas before, I think it's reasonable to say sometimes it's hard to justify from an economic standpoint moving into a regenerative agriculture system. But now all of a sudden the value of nitrogen that a hairy vetch produces, for instance, has doubled and tripled as well. So it causes farmers to look into this. So, what I simply mentioned yesterday is we have been farming with dysfunctional soils, and we need, all these products to kind of keep everything going on life support, if you will. And that's an extreme analogy, but I try to make a point, make people think. So now that we're looking more to build our soils up in the context where we don't need as many inputs, it all of a sudden it's become more attractive. So I think the biggest barrier is mindsets and just just changing. And then once your mindset's changed, okay, now how do I do this? How many pounds of crimson clover should I plant? What should I mix that with? What grass species should I mix it with? How much nitrogen can I reduce? And this doesn't matter if we're growing corn or hemp. So that's kind of what my conversation was about yesterday.
Okay. Is there something you can point to that like every farmer should be doing when it comes to soil health, whether you're a hemp farmer, corn farmer, dairy farmer, whatever?
Well, again, I like to think of foundational answers here. And that's the answer I'm going to tell you is to educate yourself, to get familiar with how to do this. So we have been so used to addressing symptoms and trying to put Band-Aids on things. I think we all agree we really should be addressing the problems, the root causes out there. And it actually does have to do with the roots. So, by being able to reduce inputs, that's not just like, okay, I'm not going to put any fertilizer on, or I'm going to reduce my fertilizer by 50%. Okay, you have to do something else. And then I bring in very quickly, look at nature, look at the woods, see how things grow. They seem to do okay without any fertilizer. There doesn't seem to be nutrient deficiencies when you look at a woods, which is typical here in Pennsylvania. If you're out in the Midwest, it might be a prairie. They seem to grow. Well, how does that work? It's the biology that's in the soil. So we've pretty much applied all our stuff, our fertilizers and everything, and it's made, I'm going to say it this way, the microbes lazy. And then also mycorrhizal fungi which is a word you need to get familiar with if you're going to be in this regenerative agriculture space. It's actually a fungi that attaches itself to the roots of plants, and it feeds off the exudates that the plant gives, captures from the sun, and then it goes out and essentially extends the root system of a plant and can bring in nutrients. So not to get too scientific on you, but I think that's a farmer-friendly way of describing it. You're extending the ability of a plant to get nutrients. Now, here's the problem. When you till the soil, you break up the fungi and kill it. Not totally, but you hamper it. It's like a tornado going through your house. You can fix it, but it sets you back. So that's why trying to reduce our tillage is key to this. And then growing mycorrhiza-friendly crops, be it cash crops or cover crops, to enhance the microorganisms and the mycorrhizal fungi in the soil, then we can start to reduce our nutrients that we apply.
Okay. Thinking about, you talked about the prairies out in the Midwest, and I've heard stories that, there's only like 50 seasons left, like the topsoil out there has been decimated, with industrial farming over the past few generations. And that soil was, it was like grasslands that was, stampeded by the herds of buffalo. And, there was this amazing natural cycle. What do you think the solution there in the Midwest is to reinvigorate those soils and sort of to save that farmland?
Yeah. So I've heard the 50-year, put out there before. That certainly is true for some soils. I would also say, to be fair, it's probably not true to some of the 3-foot deep topsoils in Iowa or Illinois. So I'll just, to be fair for that discussion.
Sure.
Now, to your question, well, we have to save the soil. We have to keep it on the farm. And that's either, it leaves by water erosion or wind erosion. So how can we do that? Well, we keep the soil covered, hence cover crops. That's why they have the name, cover crops, a crop that's planted between the cash crops. So even in a hemp situation, what you grow between that cycle of hemp, which hemp, only grows like 4 months out of the year, what's happening in those soils? So it's not just though about keeping those soils covered. It's about keeping the biology in their soils active, alive. And then that can do so much for us if we learn how to manage that. And the problem nowadays is us farmers have lost a lot of that information, or we simply don't know how to do it. Now, that doesn't mean that everything our grandfathers and great-grandfathers did was correct. And I'm not blaming also my ancestors for the way they denigrated the land. At that point, they were doing what everybody says was the thing to do.
Right.
In that context, I am sure that 20 years from now, we'll be talking about some of the foolish things we did in 2022. So that it's not a blame game, but here we are in 2022. We are learning now collectively that we can actually grow crops with less inputs. And I don't like the high prices of everything, but in the silver lining, you might say, is it's forcing farmers to think outside their box and consider some of these things that some of us have been doing for a couple decades. And I feel like saying, see, I told you so, but
you wouldn't do that. You're not doing that.
No, I wouldn't do that. Not at all. So anyway, but no, we're all here to learn. I don't care where people are at as much as I care where are they going.
Right.
And I think the future is headed, I know the future is headed toward a more biological approach in the way we farm everything.
Well, I think your mindset there sort of shows, your commitment to education and, your quality as a teacher. I'm not sure how to say that, but yeah, you've got a good mindset for that.
Thank you.
When you say that cover crops make good farmers better and bad farmers worse, what do you mean?
So it's a fun, catchy slogan, and I'm not trying to offend a bad farmer, and I'm not trying to say, oh, because you had a failure that you're a bad farmer. That being said, the point is when you add cover crops, and let's just keep it to cover crops, there's all kinds of other things you could be doing. When you add cover crops, it's another layer of management. So it's a management awareness and a management skill. And sometimes I'll follow up and I'll say to farmers, hey, if you would move to Louisiana and start growing sugarcane, well, what would you do? You would learn from the locals how to do it. And if you wouldn't learn the management techniques to do that, you would become a failure. But the other thing is that when we go cover crops, that's another level of management. It's like a new crop. So you have to do something to learn. You have to educate yourself. And there's a lot of there's so many opportunities now to do that. So that's not an excuse. There's plenty of good information out there to learn from.
Okay. But I guess that extra layer of management, it's like you have one more chance to screw it up, I guess is what you're saying. Like maybe the bad farmer who's not. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Just because you buy a bag of cover crop seeds doesn't make you a successful cover crop farmer. And there's many other analogies I could give, but the point of that saying is you have to embrace another level of management. That's the point.
Okay. I know you and I have had previous conversations about Roundup and glyphosate and whatever. And, a lot of no-till farmers will use that for the burn down. But lately you've stumbled upon a new product called Harpy. It's a bioherbicide. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I think they pronounce it HARP. The E is silent, but you can look it up at harpbio.com.
Oh, okay.
HARPEBIO.com. Yeah, pretty excited about that. And, just in case people are wondering, where does Steve Groff stand on Roundup or glyphosate? It's been way overused. And you could maybe make an analogy to gasoline, fossil fuels. Okay. But to eliminate them just like that is probably would be difficult, because some of the good characteristics of glyphosate is it allows for reduced or no tillage, which helps save the mycorrhizae. It helps save soil from washing away. Now, the other side of that, glyphosate's been used so much that weeds are becoming resistant to it and no longer works. And yes, there's evidence that it is harmful. And too much of anything can cause problems. I mean, we sprinkle salt on our food, but if you would ingest the whole salt shaker, it'd probably kill you. Maybe not a great analogy here, but just putting it out there. So, I've been kind of musing for the last several years, there got to be someone out there working on an organic type of Roundup, or I'll say it another way, a more environmentally friendly herbicide that could control our cover crops and or our weeds without the use of tillage. So I knew the CEO of this company, and from years back, and I've been invited by him to speak at meetings he had with sustainable and regenerative ag conferences and so forth. And I knew he got this new job at this new company. And at first I'm like, well, we'll see what happens, because we've heard of glimmers of hope on the horizon before. This seems to be different. They're well funded. I know the people behind it. I'm actually have a call tomorrow with the owners of the company, because my role in this, since I'm into roller crimping, and I brought the first roller crimper to the United States in 1996. I've been involved in that. And for those of you who don't know, roller crimping is a device that we roll the cover crops before planting, and we can sometimes terminate them completely without any chemistry at all, or sometimes a little bit is needed. So rolling is not like a replacement for Roundup, but it can be in certain situations. Mm-hmm. But this new herbicide is well on the way to be organically approved. It's based on natural components, plant-based. It's actually plant-based, not enzyme-based, but plant-based. And you're able to spray it on, and it kills weeds, and it helps to terminate cover crops. So my role is going to be doing research this summer on how it's effective in the context of rolling cover crops.
Okay.
As of now, there's not going to be any available to farmers yet. They're not sure when it will be ready. More testing needs to be done. But I'm excited about this, because this could be a game changer in all of agriculture, not just organic, regenerative, or conventional, because it can be used in all sectors. And so it's definitely showing some promise, and that's why I'm starting to talk about it.
Okay. Getting back to the roller crimper. So that partially terminates the crop, but it leaves the roots intact, and then the plant material sort of acts as a mulch, and then you would what? Sort of drill your seeds into that?
Yeah, so the roll crimper does two purposes. It rolls the cover crop down so it's not standing, because when you plant a new crop, direct seed it or transplant, like in hemp, which you can do both, you can't plant it into a 6 foot tall rye. So you have to get it down. So that's what it does, the one thing. The other thing is, because of the crimping action, there's blades on it. It crimps the stems of a cover crop every 6 to 8 inches, depending on the design. You don't want it really to cut the stems. You want it to crimp them. So it basically renders the plant, it just dies because it can't no longer function.
Okay.
So you have to have then special planters. Now for direct seeding, and I spent a lot of time doing some direct seeded hemp, both fiber and also CBD type strains. And it takes a special no-till planter. You just can't fill your corn planter with hemp seeds and go plant hemp because the seeds are so much smaller. And I won't get into the details of that. Transplanting also has a special planter. Now, I had designed a no-till vegetable transplanter years ago and used it on lots of acres for tomatoes over the years, but that worked perfect for hemp. But the one I designed is not readily available. It's kind of like a one of a kind. So then I thought I'm going to try to make a water wheel transplanter work. That's what hemp farmers use to transplant into raised beds in plastic. It's simply a wheel with spikes on it, and water flows in, and as it goes around, the water goes into the ground right before you put your plant in. It's a very, very simple concept. And so here locally, some of the Nault's Produce Supply and Rainflow Irrigation, which a lot of people will not recognize those names, they built these water wheel planters. They actually designed a no-till version, particularly for pumpkin growers. Growing pumpkins no-till is a big advantage because you grow the pumpkins and they grow out on the rolled cover crop and they're cleaner. So that's been a driving force where 75% of pumpkins and squash are no-tilled in Pennsylvania now. So it was easy to do that for hemp. Now I still had to build the spikes heavier and change the angle of them. And it's a little hard to describe without seeing pictures, but so it is possible to no-till hemp transplants with a water wheel planter that has been adapted for no-till. You do have to buy a special component on the hitch that has two colders, that is a cylinder that pushes them down into the soil with springs. So that's a necessary thing. The other thing is to get the right spikes that work better in a no-till situation.
Okay. I want to get to your hemp operation in a minute, but I was out in Denver at the Farmers Union convention a couple of weeks ago, and I thought of you because there was a discussion about nutrient density. And I know you and I have had conversations about that you say in the future, farmers are going to be paid for the nutrient value of their crops too. And there was a guy who was working on this. I guess it's an app where maybe at some point in the future you can use your phone, maybe even at the grocery store, and scan a vegetable, and you'll get a nutrient density report, which is pretty neat. I don't know how any of that stuff works, but yeah.
Well, Eric, I have one of those right here.
Do you?
Actually, I have the first generation. The one you probably saw, I'm waiting on. It's the second generation.
Okay.
Very well involved with that with my vegetables, because I do believe that's the future. I mentioned that in my book, The Future Proof Farm. That's one of the things that I see coming down the pike. And honestly, farmers should be paid for quality, not for quantity. And I will say that for hemp as well. And that's probably not for a couple of years from now, but that's the direction we're headed. It makes a whole lot of sense, but it is kind of disrupting the current system, if you will. But if they get this nutrient density meter figured out, and it gives competent readings, the point is where you could be a shopper, and you could be in the produce section of a store, and you could point this to a tomato, and you could compare the nutrient density of several different brands of tomatoes or coming from several different farms, and you can pick the one out. They actually are looking at algorithms where they will actually tell you your best nutrient value per dollar.
Oh, wow.
Which is kind of interesting. I don't know if they'll get that far, but the technology is here. It's and again, like anything else, it's calibrating it to be consistent. Version 1 that I used, it was cool, but it wasn't consistent. You can come back to the same product and it wouldn't read consistently, but it does give you some numbers. So still some work to be done on there. But that again is one of those things I look to be potential game changers in all of agriculture. And it's not just tomatoes or vegetables, corn and soybeans, because if you grow a better corn, the animals that is fed to are going to do better as well.
Right.
And I'll just add right here, Eric, that we're doing some work with some medical researchers here on CBD, and we're seeing some differences in CBD produced on my farm, for example, that are showing to have a better cannabinoid profile, and we're crediting that to soil health. And I did some preliminary studies the last 2 years of my farm, looking good. And we're gonna work a little harder this year. We're gonna expand that research to see if we can quantify a relationship to a healthy soil that'll produce a healthier end CBD product.
Okay. You probably have more taglines than anyone else I've met, and one of yours is "Healthy Soil, Healthy Oil," right?
Yes.
For your CBD brand, Cedar Meadow.Farm.
Yeah. Cedar Meadow.Farm is our brand, our website. And we feel we can stand by that claim. We've done enough testing now. We haven't promoted that heavily other than the brand, because I am waiting for more results. Because I'm someone, I've done hundreds, if not, I've done thousands of research plots over the years with my cover crop business and my background. Mm-hmm. And I feel that when I bring something to market, I want to be able to stand behind it with certainty. And so we want to have science-based claims. If one thing that annoys me about the hemp industry is there's all kinds of wild claims about everything. And that's detrimental. Those of you who are listening here, don't do that. We need to have integrity in what we do. And yes, I believe that hemp can do all kinds of wonders, things, including all but miraculous. I get that, and I'm there. But be careful about our claims. And so that's why I want to come to market. I'm able to make that statement, better soil, better oil, because of my history of my vegetables. I can claim that because I could show you the data. I could show you data with my hemp now, but it's not quite there yet that I want the strength behind that that I want. So that is continuing. And for me, I want to rise the tide so all ships rise.
Sure.
Because I want this industry to succeed, and we have to be integrous about it. And that's a high value that I have. And so I guess you'd say in one way, I want to lead by example, and I want to see other farmers producing good hemp products that are legitimately grown in healthy soil. And I'll just add, I have seen some claims by farmers who claim they're sustainable. They claim they're regenerative. And when I dig into a little bit what's behind it, I'm like, I'm not sure. They're just throwing out buzzwords because they're cool right now. And I would say those of you listening who are buying from a company, do a little bit of due diligence if you're concerned about that. Now, I think all CBD is good, but if you want to support farmers who are really doing it right, do a little bit of homework and investigation in that.
Good advice. Well, let's talk about hemp on your farm. What's your plan this year? Let's talk acres, varieties, fiber grain, CBD, all of the above. Is there going to be a hemp maze this year? What's happening down there at Cedar Meadow?
Eric, it's no different than the last 3 years. I am not sure yet, and it's the middle of March when it's being recorded. I will be growing some CBD hemp. Definitely doing that just to keep in the game. I have a variety I'm working on. That's the key. I want to pretty much have everything under my control, if you will. And I want to hone in on a variety that works well on my farm. So I'm working with Joe Ullman and that, who you've interviewed before.
Yep.
And just a shout out to him and what he's doing. I appreciate our relationship. The other thing is about the hemp maze. As fun as that was last year and as good as it was effective. We kind of made a tough decision not to do it And here's the reason. And, my farm here is not really set up for agri entertainment. And my concern was if we do it again, it's probably going to get bigger. And well, you're like, well, why did you stop? Well, that's the problem. I can't handle the traffic. I just thought, you know what, that was effective for 2021. It was a lot of fun, but we decided we're going to focus on our brand, on selling our brand of Cedar Meadow.Farm, our CBD products, lotions, and tinctures, and so forth. So no hemp maize planned this year. I would encourage someone else to do it though.
Okay.
Why not? I mean, great idea. So go for it. So as far as fiber and seed, I am going to be working with the Heartland Hemp. You probably want to talk about that then.
Yeah, that's the next question on my list here.
All right, so I'll just give you a soft lead into that. So the other thing that I really want to do on the side is for grain. I really think here in Pennsylvania, the grain market, the seeds of hemp may be the easiest to go to market. I mean, we know that Crater's Eggs did it with chickens, and I understand the process that they went through. I'm not going to be spending $250,000 to do it, but at least right now, I want to test some varieties to see where I'm going to do what I can right now to understand what varieties work here. Because I really think with all the animals we have here, especially I'm from Lancaster County, why can't we put hemp in every feed ration? I think, why not? So that's kind of where whatever I can do. And I'm very frustrated. I heard your guest last week, the Hemp Feed Coalition. Mm-hmm. It's just ridiculous. I don't have good words to say how I feel about that. It's frustrating why we can't use a product that has been widely used. There's no known side effects. And it is very frustrating. And I'm trying to be kind here. So I hope that the seed thing is out, and I'm working with the fiber on the side as well too. Because anything in hemp that I can do here on my farm, I'm involved with as much as the extent I can be.
Yeah, good. A couple of weeks ago, I interviewed Tim Allman from Heartland Industries, the company in Detroit, Michigan, that has recently gotten a grant from the USDA to, I guess it's funding their hemp for soil program, and they're working with farmers in various states. And you reached out to me and said that you might be one of those farmers trialing hemp here in Pennsylvania. So can you talk about that relationship?
Yeah, so kind of I actually saw that come out and I thought, wow, that's right up my alley. And then David Canby contacted me from Biofill Fibers, and somehow he was involved, and he said, hey, we need you on this whole deal, because right in the whole premise of this grant is growing hemp using soil health, regenerative agriculture, and carbon sequestration principles. And carbon sequestration is more than just growing hemp. I mean, I'll just quickly say that if you till your soil, you're losing most of the stuff that you sequester. So that's not doing you much good. But if you don't till the soil, and then if you use cover crops, now we're talking about net gains of carbon sequestration. So that's partly what this project is supposed to be doing. So I'm kind of brought in as a consultant in one hand, but also I'm going to grow a couple acres for them to test some of the things. It's more of a research thing here in my farm. Details have not all been worked out, but I really appreciated, talking with Tim and his team, where they feel they want to go. I think they're leading by example, and I'm glad that this grant is out there to help to get some of the word out. It was also good to meet some new farmers that are growing hemp that I hadn't been in contact with before. So I think collectively, this is going to be a leader, provide some leadership in growing hemp that is legitimately in the regenerative agriculture category. So I'm excited to be a part of it. I'm sure the details will unfold here as spring turns into summer and all. But so yeah, I'm going to be involved in some of that.
Good. Yeah, it's nice to have sort of a local connection to that sort of nationwide project.
Mm-hmm.
So I know you're busy. You've got some irrigation lines to go take care of up in the the greenhouses. So I'll let you get back to that. But any final thoughts? Anything else you want our listeners to know about life on the farm there?
Yeah, I'm just going to continue to, learn myself. This whole nutrient density thing and quality, applies to hemp. That's a big thing of what I'm going to be involved with this year. I would just encourage those of you who are growing to hang in there and refine your skills, get to know this crop. I would say if you're brand new to hemp, the first thing you need to do is to find a market for whatever you're trying to grow. And I'm going to say right away, someone you can trust. Someone that has a little bit of a track record out there that they do what they say. There's hundreds of contracts that have been broken over the last couple years. And right now, even in the CBD side and any aspect of it, it's not lucrative. And part of that is good. I think that was the big problem in 2019 for CBD. It was so over the top lucrative that everything was destroyed almost. So now we're kind of down to the people who are really serious about this. And I've kind of taken a position, it's a good place to be in because I believe in the future of hemp. It's even, and I've never dealt with a crop that had so many crazy government restrictions on. That's frustrating. We can't be totally turned loose, but I think that'll happen. I hope we don't run into too many headwinds from whoever, but I'm here to keep plugging away, Eric, like you are. I'm the farmer side of it, and I'll just say I appreciate what all you're continuing to do. Your voice is needed out there, so thank you, and thank you for giving me the time here today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of feel like a conduit just to get other people's stories out and amplified and bring people together. So yeah, I'm proud of the work that I'm doing.
Well, I tell you what, when world history is written, I think Eric Herlock's name's going to be there as far as the hemp story. So
yeah, appreciate that.
Yeah.
All right, well, hemp innovator and cover crop coach Steve Groff, thank you so much for your time today.
You're welcome.
Now get back to work.
All right.
All right, well, that does it for the show today. Thank you for listening. Before I go, I just want to give a shout out to the folks down there in Garrett County, Maryland. There's a small regenerative farm called Backbone Hemp, and they sent me a real nice care package with a few of their products. It all looks great, smells great, and feels great. So thank you so much, and if you get a chance, check them out at backbonehemp.com. All right, my name is Eric Herlock. I'm the digital editor at Lancaster Farming Newspaper, the greatest agricultural newspaper in the world. Check us out online at lancasterfarming.com, where you can also find links to the news nuggets. Okay, so check it out, and you can always get in touch with me. Send an email to podcast@lancasterfarming.com. And all right, that's it. I'm going to leave you today with some more sounds of spring here in Pennsylvania, some peepers from along the French Creek. All right, and if you listen closely, you might actually even hear a weird turtle. Anyway, until next time, I'll see you in the newspaper. This episode of the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast is copyright 2020 by Lancaster Farming Newspaper, which is part of the Steinman Communications family. Today's show is written and recorded, edited, and produced by Eric Herlock. The music you hear throughout the show is courtesy of Tin Bird Shadow.